So, hi Danielle, welcome back.
Hi.
How are you doing this week?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, I know last week we just briefly talked about your experiences within your program and how in business you had to do a lot of presentations, and during those presentations that you find yourself feeling a little uncomfortable and that you're nervous when presenting. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So this week I sort of just wanted to touch on what we talked about last week and expand on it a little bit to get a better understanding of your thoughts and feelings when presenting and in those situations. Does that work for you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, perfect. So I know last time that you did say about how you felt during when you're giving presentations or in group settings. Can you maybe explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I just get really nervous when I'm presenting. I get really anxious and then I start to sweat, and then I start to stutter, and that makes me more anxious. And I feel like then I'm just kind of on this downward spiral where it just progressively gets worse and worse because I'm getting so nervous when I'm presenting.
Okay, so you're expressing that you're getting that nervousness and anxiousness, that feeling, especially when you're noticing that your hands are sweating and it's getting uncomfortable when presenting in front of people. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you're definitely having those feelings, and during those feelings, what's going on in your head when that's happening?
I think I'm very focused on what other people might be thinking of me, especially in my program. Like, everybody's really smart. We're all in business school. Like, obviously, we had to do a lot to get here. And so I'm kind of intimidated by everyone. And then in general, like, I know my presentation skills aren't that good. So I just think that people think I'm stupid, that I'm not good at what I'm doing.
Okay. So those feelings and thoughts that you're having are very normal. Like you said, when you're in a program where the expectations are high, especially regarding giving presentations, it can be very normal to feel that way. So I know that you spoke about having these thoughts that you're not good enough, or that your presentation skills aren't good. That also can connect a lot to those feelings that you had previously when you spoke about feeling anxious and feeling like your hands are sweating and you're getting nervous.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of connection with those thoughts and feelings from what you're saying.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And when you're having these thoughts, is this just something that you're thinking that other people are thinking about you, or is this also what you're thinking about yourself?
I think it definitely like relates to what I think about myself, because then when I start to think that other people think that I'm not good at presenting or that I'm stupid, then I start to think that I also just don't belong here. Like, maybe I chose the wrong program.
Okay, so those thoughts of feeling like you don't belong, sort of like imposter syndrome a little bit, is what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're having those thoughts based off of the thoughts of what you think other people are thinking of you, correct?
I think so, yeah. Just like thinking about whenever I start to think about what other people are thinking, I just think maybe I just shouldn't be here. Like, maybe I just like should choose a program where maybe I don't have to present so much.
Okay, and I think that that's a normal experience for a lot of university students coming in, especially in the first few years like you are, to just think that you don't belong and that you don't know why you're here, when comparing yourself to other people or to the thoughts that you think other people have of you. So I just want to normalize those feelings, just so that you feel a little bit more comfortable with expressing how you've been, your thoughts and your feelings in those situations.
Yeah, that is good to hear, because I don't talk about this with other people, so I don't know how other people feel. But if you're saying that other people feel this way too, then it does make me feel a bit better.
Yeah, and I know it can be a lot to come and share these thoughts and feelings that you're having. So I really appreciate you doing that, because it just shows how determined and motivated you are. Because I know previously when we spoke, you talked a lot about wanting to improve with giving presentations. So this is a great first step to think of these solutions and dive a little bit deeper into what we can do to maybe help you feel a little bit more comfortable and confident when giving those presentations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So just going off of those thoughts and feelings that you've already shared of feeling very anxious and then having these thoughts that people think that you're dumb or not good enough. How does that make you feel in those moments?
Like I said, it makes me just feel really anxious and nervous when I'm presenting, and then also like leading up to the presentation, the days before, I'm always thinking about it too, so it makes me really anxious.
Absolutely. That can be very anxiety provoking, especially like you said, leading up to those moments where you have to present. So I wanted to ask, if we look at a scale of 1 to 10, so 1 being that you have no anxiety, and then 10 being the most anxiety that you've felt. If we're looking at when you're giving those presentations or in those group settings, in that when you're giving a presentation, what would you give yourself on that scale? So again, 1 being no anxiety, 10 being a lot of anxiety.
I would say probably like an 8.
An 8? Okay. So that definitely is high of a number on this scale. Is there any reason that you didn't give yourself higher, like a 9 or a 10 on the scale?
Well, I think that even though my anxiety is really high, and like I said, it's really uncomfortable for me leading up to the presentation and everything, I've still been able to give the presentations, even though I don't really think they're that good. But I feel like I wouldn't put myself at a 10, because I feel like in that sense, I probably just wouldn't be able to do the presentation at all. Like, I'm still able to talk myself through it and get myself to go up there. It just really sucks for me, like leading up to it and during. I just like don't like how I feel at all.
Absolutely. And I want to share with you that that's amazing that you even get yourself to go up and present, even though you do feel uncomfortable and anxious. So you should be very proud of yourself for being able to still bring yourself to do that, even though I know that there's a lot of anxiety that you're feeling in those moments.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. So I know, going back to that 8 that you shared, obviously 8 is still a high number on that scale when we're looking at it. So can you maybe share why it is that you put yourself at an 8?
Like I said, like my anxiety is still really high, so I don't think I could go lower than an 8, but obviously, like, because like I said, I'm still able to present, like it's not so high that it's like maxed at 10.
Okay. And when you're saying that you're giving yourself an 8, is there any ways that you've been able to cope when presenting that you've noticed about yourself?
Not so much like when presenting. I feel like leading up to it, I try to like tell myself some positive affirmations, like that I've read about and everything on the internet and stuff, just things that other people have said have been helpful. But it's still kind of hard because I don't know if I like how much I believe it, but I just try to repeat that to myself. And then afterwards, I like to give myself a break after I've done the presentation, because it's usually a lot for me, not just during the presentation, but leading up to it. But I still like, I think I still need to learn how to actually deal with it.
Of course. And that's great that you have those coping skills before and after the presentation, because it seems to me that it's been helping you at least to be able to get through that presentation and at least be able to be in front of that audience, even though there is that discomfort that you're feeling, but you're still at that point where you're able to present. So that's great.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's still room for improvement in areas with coping that you want to explore more. And that's something that we can definitely do over the course of our time together to help expand your knowledge of coping skills and also see what's a good fit for you and maybe what's not a good fit for you.
Yeah, for sure. Because I definitely think that I need to learn those coping skills, because since I don't have them, that's why I think I also like stutter and stuff during the presentation. And then I start to think that I'm even worse.
Absolutely. And like you said, that stutter and thinking that you're worse definitely comes out when presenting, because I know that you shared that. So if we can work on that, that would definitely be a good place to start.
Yeah.
So I want to just transition this talk a little bit. I wanted to ask you maybe a little bit of a stranger question, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Okay. So I sort of want you to imagine that, let's say after we meet today, you go home and you do your regular routine. So you drive home, you make food for yourself, then after you do the dishes and you do a little bit of homework before the end of your night, and then let's say that you go to bed. And And in the middle of the night, when you're sleeping, a miracle happens. And you don't know that this miracle happened because you're sleeping, but when you wake up in the morning, the thing that brought you here today has been resolved. So that anxiety that you're feeling in presentations is no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
So can you maybe say, in that moment when you're waking up, what would be different about your day if that miracle happened?
I think if I woke up, especially if it was a presentation day or maybe the day before, I definitely wouldn't feel so nervous and I wouldn't be thinking about the presentation all day. I would just feel a lot less anxiety in general. And then if I was presenting that day, I wouldn't be so nervous, like I said, and I wouldn't be stuttering, and I wouldn't be getting so sweaty and like just not presenting well. I think I would be a better presenter.
Absolutely. So you would feel a lot more confident when you're when you're presenting, and you wouldn't feel as nervous, like you said, with the hands sweating. Those feelings that you spoke about previously,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be as prominent and in the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad to hear that in that miracle situation, you would notice those changes within yourself when presenting.
Mm-hmm.
So going back, I know we did the scaling question previously, and you rated yourself an 8 on the scale when you're giving a presentation and experiencing anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So now looking at this miracle situation that you just spoke about, where would you rate yourself in that miracle situation on a scale of 1 to 10? So again, 1 being no anxiety, and then 10 being the max amount of anxiety that you've had.
Ideally, I think I would if that miracle happened, I would like to be at like a 3 or a 4.
Okay, that's great. So a lot lower on the scale and maybe feeling a little bit more comfortable when presenting.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. And the 3 or the 4 that's like your goal that you're trying to work towards?
I think so, because I think a little bit of anxiety is probably good so that like I'm prepared for the presentation, but I just don't want it to be so debilitating on my life like it is right now.
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you shared that. And it's definitely something that we can work towards. So I just wanted to take a little bit of a break because we talked about a lot so far. And I just want to take a moment myself and reflect on what we've discussed. And then I also would like for you in this little break to think about that miracle question that we were just discussing and the impact that that would have on you as when you're presenting. And then when we come back, we'll explore that a little further, if that's okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
So now we're gonna transition.
Okay, so Danielle, so I know that previously we were talking about the this miracle situation where you would wake up and you said that your anxiety would come down from an 8 to a 3 or a 4, and you would just feel a lot more confident presenting and you would have less anxiety, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm just kind of curious, right now, you know, when you're presenting and you're at that 8, what do you think is keeping you from achieving that miracle or achieving that level of anxiety from coming down to a 3 or a 4?
I think just when I'm presenting, I'm so worried about what other people are thinking. Like when I get up in front of everyone, I'm just thinking that they think I'm stupid, that they think I'm a terrible presenter, and that I'm doing a bad job. So I'm just so focused on what other people think, and it affects how I think about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I have so much anxiety surrounding that situation, I don't know what to do to even get myself to be lower because I'm just so nervous leading up to it. And then when I'm presenting, I start to stutter and my hands are sweating, and I just can't even think of ways to reduce that anxiety because it's just overtakes me.
Yeah, that's really understandable, right? You've kind of explained a lot that's going on. Like you're feeling anxious, and then you're physically feeling you're shaky, and I think you said you get a stutter and you're sweating, and then you have all those thoughts about what other people are thinking about you, which is so normal. Because giving a presentation, especially to a big group, can be nerve-wracking, and so having those thoughts, it would make sense that you would be feeling anxious. And so I'm just curious, kind of looking at those thoughts about how you think that people think you're stupid, or that you're not good at presenting. Have you ever been given any sort of feedback that has been true at all?
Mm, I don't know if I've ever been told that it's true. I think it's just myself that like I think that people are thinking that way, and that I just like know it myself that it to be true, but like I haven't really been told that I can think about.
Okay, that's interesting. So maybe I'll ask kind of the opposite question. Um, we can maybe focus on a specific thought there. Like you, I think, no, you mentioned a few times when you're presenting, you think that people think you're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So are there times when that thought has not been true?
Yeah, I can sort of see it not being true because when I was in high school, actually, one of my teachers was like really nice. And when I was presenting, I think she could tell that I was nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that afterwards, like, I did a really good job. And I was very happy with the feedback that I got. So in that moment, I really didn't feel all that stupid at all because I got pretty good feedback. But that's only like the one time that I can think of because my prop or my teacher in that moment was very nice and
Mm-hmm.
understood how nervous I was. So that was definitely like a moment that I could think of.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is you have these thoughts that you think that people think you're stupid when you're presenting, but it sounds to me like you haven't really been told that before, but you have been told the opposite, where you've been told that you've done a good job at presenting and that, like you said, that teacher was really nice and gave you really positive feedback. So
Mm-hmm.
how does that make you feel right now about that thought now that we've explored that a little bit?
It's sort of making me like think a little bit differently because before I guess I just assumed that these thoughts were permanent and that they were like true, and like I never really thought about the fact that somebody could think differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't even think about my teacher until we sort of brought it up, and then I realized like that was that she did give me that good feedback. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's maybe a little bit of where I'm thinking is that now my thoughts are changing a little bit, but I still get those thoughts of before of feeling stupid and stuff. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
I mean, that's fair. I think that these thoughts, especially when we've had them for a really long time, they come so automatically that, we're not really sitting there when we're about to present, we're not thinking about whether or not we have evidence for it or not, right? So that's why it can be helpful to explore it in this way and really break it down. And it's also important because, as you mentioned before, these thoughts are causing a lot of those feelings of anxiety and even those physical symptoms. So sometimes starting at the thoughts and really trying to maybe change those thoughts if we can be a good way to kind of change the way that we're feeling physically and emotionally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense because I never really thought about it before of that like linkage. And also when I'm presenting, I just always assume like the worst, and I can't get my brain to think about anything else besides how bad I'm going to do or how stupid I am in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really thought about it in this way.
Yeah. So then why don't we explore that a bit more? We talked about that one thought where you think people think that you're stupid. Are there any other thoughts that are really prominent for you that bother you a lot when you're presenting?
Yeah, so like you said, the thought of being stupid is a big one, but another big one that I always think about is that people are going to judge me because I do have that stutter when I'm speaking, especially in front of big crowds. I get really nervous, and then it's very obvious that I have a stutter. So that's something that I think about too, is that they're going to make fun of me and think that it's like that I'm lame or a loser because I have this stutter.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is something that is hard to overcome, especially when you're giving a presentation. And I know that being nervous kind of makes that stutter worse for you. Have there been times where you've gotten bad negative feedback because of your stutter?
Not really. I know that sometimes like my friends will just make a comment about it like afterwards, but never anything like negative. It's more so just them being like, "Oh, I noticed that you had a little bit of a stutter when we were presenting and stuff," because I don't normally talk with a stutter or anything, but nothing like really negative that I can think about, just a few comments here and there.
Okay, so it doesn't really sound like that's ever really been an issue with the actual presentations that you've been given, but again, it sounds like it's another one of those automatic thoughts that comes in, that, you know, maybe because you're thinking about it so much, you've kind of you can kind of convince yourself that that's true, right? That people will judge you even though they've never done that before.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I always tell myself that it's true. Like if I'm thinking that they're thinking that way, then it has to be true that they're thinking about my stutter and they're thinking about how dumb and stupid I am. So
yeah, that makes sense. So, you know, I know that when you said that when you're presenting right now, your anxiety is over and that it's an 8. So thinking about what we've talked about today, if you were able to go into your next presentations with more of an awareness for how these thoughts might not be true, do you think that might help with lowering your anxiety at all?
yeah, I think it definitely could help get me even from like an 8 to a 7, because I know right now that these thoughts are just so overwhelming, especially leading up to my presentation. I'm just worried about it, and then it like makes me even more anxious. So if I could reduce that a little bit by like thinking a little bit more positively, I think that that could help at least bring me down from an 8 to a 7.
Yeah, and I like that, you know, you kind of set a realistic goal for yourself, right? We're not jumping from an 8 to a 3 or 4 right away, but even getting it down to a 7, and even if it's not during the presentation, because I know that's probably the most anxiety provoking for you, but even if we can lower it beforehand, that could be a good goal. And so I think something that could be helpful is I do have these thought record worksheets that I could send you home with kind of as homework. And what they are is kind of very similar to what we've done today. It's just identifying those thoughts that are coming to you automatically and causing those symptoms of anxiety, and writing them down. And then kind of it'll ask you for evidence for the thought, anytime you've maybe been given feedback on that where it's been true, and then evidence against it. And it'll kind of ask you as well to rate your anxiety before you've done that and then after you've done that, to see if that's helped you reduce your anxiety. And I think it's also just a good way to help you become more aware of those thoughts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I never really thought about doing that before and tracking it like you said. But I do think that that could be helpful, because I definitely do have a lot of thoughts leading up to it, and sometimes afterwards, like we sort of talked about today, maybe they're not actually like something that is true. So that would be good to sort of keep track of that and know that.
Yeah, and also like how we talked about before, sometimes we're not so aware of these thoughts because they come so automatically because we're so used to them. So taking that time to write them down can help us just to be more aware of it, and then maybe you can catch them the next time that they happen, right?
Okay, yeah, I definitely think that that's something I can try to do and see if that's helpful.
Yeah, so why don't I send you home with that? And then you can come back next session and you can bring that with you and we can explore that, and also just how that's impacted your week having done that, and then we can go from there and see what else we can do.
Okay, that's definitely something I'll try. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today?
No, I think you explained that really good, and now I can go home and see, because I do have a presentation coming up in the next week, so I think that that will be helpful to try out.
Yeah, for sure, especially given the presentation. Maybe you can see if writing it down will be helpful for reducing your anxiety, even just the days leading up to it, because I know you said that that was really rough for you too.
Yeah, it is. So I'll definitely try to do that and implement that.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.